Treasury used to be predictable and built for a world where money moved at the speed of paperwork. That world is deeply in the rearview mirror. Today's finance teams operate across multiple banks, multiple systems, and multiple jurisdictions, yet they still fight the same old battles. Fragmented visibility, manual workflows, and uncertain data integrity when it matters the most. But what can Treasury look like when it's transformed for the digital age? This episode of ATP wants to explore Treasury innovation. How will banks, fintechs, and global corporates build the interoperability and trust required to operate at scale in a real-time world? Can Treasury shift from visibility to insightful predictability? And as companies expand across markets globally and payment volumes accelerate, how is the role of Treasurer evolving? This is going to be an extra special episode of ATP. We'll be joined by David Hanna, a co-founder and CEO of Finmo, Kriti Jain, MD and Head of Digital Economy, Fintech and Platform at Deutsche Bank, and Jesse Toe, a Global Treasurer at Coda Payments. Let's welcome David first. David, welcome to ATP and welcome to the Singapore FinTech Festival 2025. How are you?
No, very well. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's awesome to have you here. Let's just jump right into this. Why is Treasury management so ready for innovation, and what is fundamentally broken in the way global finance teams operate today?
Very interesting question. I think there's been lots of segments in different aspects of organizations that have actually innovated over the years. Things like HR, operations, risk and compliance, these types of things. And actually the finance function has been somewhat held behind. And I like to call it bringing the sexy back to finance.
Let's do that.
So I think there's a real opportunity now to innovate in the finance function of not only leaving it in the back office, but bringing it to the front office and making it a much more strategic operation.
And what's broken there? Like, what needs to change? If you were talking about the innovation there, what does that really mean?
Yeah, so I think the function really at this point in time, as it sort of transitions into that more strategic enabler, is really about data, collecting some insight, trying to figure out what needs to happen from a finance function perspective in terms of workflows, payment operations, etc. And I think where it's going is actually more about sort of the foresight, the intelligence, the connected data, the banking infrastructure. How do I actually get visibility across my different sort of platforms in order to make better decisions with more intelligent sort of backing?
So I find this actually really interesting, right? Because you did mention HR, and I've spoken to a ton of companies that are kind of, what's the word I like to use? Abstracting the functionality outside of the big MNC and doing it separately, but still then selling that service back to them, right? But why do you think HR, which is fundamental to every company, right? You have to have the right people, but finance is where the money is, and all companies are about either earning money or making money or doing something with money. Why do you think it's taken longer for finance to get sort of the tech bug than it did for HR?
For sure. I think, look, a lot of my time over the years has been spent working pretty closely with the finance function.
Yep.
I spent the last 20 years in the regulatory space of various payment companies, et cetera. And often it was, more reactive to board queries or how are we going from a, general financial numbers perspective. And I think now what's happening is we're seeing CFOs really wanting to have a seat at the top table, right? In a more true sense, and actually be a lot more strategic in their sort of thinking, et cetera. And so I liken it to, the CFO really being the hero of the story, where they can actually bring kind of that intelligent insight as opposed to just reactive, information.
So I love this. I don't think I told you this before, but my first job at Morgan Stanley was in the controller's department.
There you go.
So I know this stuff. Really cool. Okay, so Finmo recently rebranded around connected financial intelligence and control for the modern CFO. What does this shift represent in the context of the mission and product journey of Finmo?
Finance heads and other business leaders don't quite sort of understand what aspect of Treasury we're talking about.
Right.
So really we wanted to center around this notion of connecting your banking infrastructure into the platform, hence the connected part, and then the ability to actually draw on, intelligent sort of insight and data to be able to make key strategic decisions.
So I was going to say, earlier you said that it was mostly reactive. Somebody in the boardroom would come say, we need to know what last quarter was like, or some other question like that.
Yeah.
But if you have these sort of foresight insights where you can think, okay, we know what we're doing today, but we can see the trajectory and the path we're going on.
Yes.
We should be more proactive about telling people what's happening so they can either do more of this or less of that.
Absolutely.
How does that get built in?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think the way I describe it, just taking a slight step back, is that often CFOs and controllers and treasurers, they're very comfortable working with Excel spreadsheets, right?
Been there, done that.
Exactly. So, one of the things that we're trying to do, again, is kind of give that real-time visibility from a bank, and cash point of view in order to make actual strategic decisions real time, right? So I'm often even asking my CFO myself,
right,
what's the sort of corridors that's, the top of mind for us, in a strategic sort of decision that I need to make or whatever the case is. And going back to an Excel spreadsheet and having to reconcile the data across different platforms or whatever the case is, cannot work, right?
No.
I need insight, real time. I need to be able to move fast. And there's also this concept of, most businesses want to be day one global. So the reality is that you're not building in a single market anymore, single widget in a single market. What you're doing is really trying to expand and compete globally with, lots of other players as well.
So tell me if I'm wrong, but if you're operating in a spreadsheet, what it means is that your data is not connected.
Absolutely.
You're taking something from here, inputting it, taking something from over here and inputting it. And that fundamentally cannot happen in real time. And real time was one of the words I used in my intro. How do you take what's been traditionally fragmented data, and believe me, I lived through this terribly, payments, liquidity, accounts payable, accounts receivable, all this stuff, and get it into the same place in real time so that literally someone can come over and the CFO can come over and tap you on the shoulder and say, David, you have to come and look at this.
Absolutely.
How do you do that?
Absolutely. So look, that's where our bank partnerships really come into the fore in terms of actually working with global banks that have the reach across, not only the Asia region, but globally, frankly, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that the merchants that we work with typically have 10, 15, 20. I mean, frankly, if I told you the real number, which is upwards of like 1,000 different accounts, if you think about investment, operation, client funds, corporate, etc., and really working with these banks that they already work with to connect their banks into our portal.
It makes it easier for them as well, no?
Exactly. So it's not as if we're giving them separate banking services or what have you. We're connecting their banks in.
Right.
It's their data. What we should be able to do is actually use that data to better predict sort of the future. So things like cash flow forecasting becomes easier, excess working capital management becomes easier, all that sort of insight as well.
Do you have in your head at least just some examples of where some company now using the entire system, they've taken all this fragmented data, they've now consolidated it all into one place and they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize my business was this thing.
For sure.
And now it can be so much better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where they had this like light bulb go on in their head.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I still almost fall off my chair when
don't do that now.
When a finance leader sort of tells me, when I ask the question, how do you manage your finance?
Right.
And he says, look, it's in Excel.
I know.
And, I think we've had a lot of clients that have moved from isolated systems, whether it be the Excels, whether it be different accounting software, different FX providers, liquidity providers, etc., and they're all isolated
completely.
And fragmented. So what we do is we bring all that together so that we can connect your data in, and then you can essentially do your downstream treasury sort of workflow. And absolutely. I mean, merchants tell us all the time that they've not only saved time, they've saved cost, but again, they've come back to that insight. From a currency risk perspective, where have I performed better over the last month since, connecting into Finmo versus the last 3 months?
Right.
How can I better predict my cash flow? How can I utilize my excess working capital to yield better return for them as a business? You can't do that if your systems are fragmented.
No way. And look, I'm thinking about what we do inside of our own company and how we track all of the money that's coming in and coming out. I'm not kidding.
We can help you too.
I can't stop thinking about it. You mentioned this term, though, financial second sight.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that before. Do you want to dig in a little bit deeper into what that means and how this connected intelligence actually enables that?
Absolutely. So look, it wouldn't be a podcast if we didn't introduce the concept of artificial intelligence, right? Or AI.
Not in 2025.
Exactly. And so it's not for the sake of just mentioning it, but really from our perspective, we've created our own AI engine. Mm-hmm. He's called Mo, as in Finmo.
Finmo.
And the reality is that what we're doing is because we plug in the data, Mo can actually be your foresight, right? He can provide you with insight into what you need to focus on even before you log into the portal.
Right.
So I see a world through our merchant lens where instead of coming to the office, having a coffee at 9 o'clock, downloading the statements, putting it into Excel, reconciling, it's 3 o'clock before you've even started.
Right.
This is Mo actually proactively indicating what you need to focus on, initially, and where you can sort of make better improvements off the bat, essentially. So that's how we sort of work with that concept of foresight. and using intelligence and data to be able to deliver that.
Has that been rolled out to all the people that are using the
has.
system at all?
Yes.
And have they seen like a fundamental difference in the way they're actually approaching all this stuff?
Look,
Because if you have someone, look, I look at AI kind of like the smartest intern you've ever had.
Yeah.
At least today, right? It's
Yeah.
obviously going to get better. But in that sense that you walk into the office and your intern or your junior says to you, David, you really need to focus on this thing today because this is really important and this is new for us kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. We've had some really great feedback with our Mo capability. I think we're seeing now really, frankly, more insightful sort of questions that are being asked of Mo.
Yeah.
And it also gives us sort of the inspiration to, build further on that, which is, do we need specific agents that can help us with specific aspects of, how people are asking their questions, et cetera? So we're definitely, looking at enhancing that capability as well. But no, for sure, we've had some really great feedback from our merchants.
So I always like to say, like, I never ask a question if I don't think that the system or the person that I'm speaking to can give the answer. It was just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But do you get the sense that because people now have this power of AI, that they're actually starting to ask different or even maybe more difficult questions?
I think so.
Do you know what I mean?
So. Yeah.
They're like, before I could not know this, but now maybe I can.
For sure. And again, it comes back to the fundamental principle that we believe in, which is it's all about the connected data, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just using an ad hoc sort of AI portal or system or whatever the case is. You've actually put your data into our platform in an aggregated, consolidated view.
Yeah.
Now you need to actually understand it. And what AI does is it allows you to get to that insight faster. So from our perspective, again, coming back to the earlier conversation, how do I make decisions faster?
Right.
How do I be in the strategic boardroom,
Yep.
in a more efficient way, an effective way? And so we're definitely seeing a lot of that insight come through.
That's super. Look, this connects directly to the 4 C's: connect, control, command, and create.
Yeah.
And I think we've covered all of them actually without even mentioning them.
For sure. And again, that's one of the reasons why, we've repositioned the business around the 4 C's framework, right? It very much tells a better story to our treasurers and CFOs and finance leaders.
Right.
Again, it puts the CFO as the hero of the story.
Yep.
It brings the sexy back to finance.
It does.
And really, that's what we're all about.
Super. Let's take a little bit of a pause, and then we'll welcome Critty
Sure.
into the show. We'll continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Super. Critty, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Let's just get right into this, yeah? Recently, we've seen a real shift from competition to collaboration between banks and fintechs. And I mean, I can tell you tons of stories about we're going to disrupt this and disrupt that. It's not going to happen. Collaboration is going to be way more important. What is the driving change across the financial? What's driving that change, you think, across the financial ecosystem where collaboration becomes way more important than people trying to disrupt?
I think it all is on client demand, right? What does the client need today? Today we have a content creator sitting in a village in Vietnam asking a big media house to send him money from US. How does that happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
We as banks can get scale, we can get trust, we can get a regulatory reliability in how money moves. But then when you need to reach the end consumer, you need to be technically advanced, you need to be agile, you need to have niche innovations which makes this fast, real time to them. And I think that's where fintechs and banks can come together and play a role. Today, the way financial industries evolved, it's just not about who's going to win the race, right? It's about how can you make the ecosystem successful to meet this client demand. And that's where I think fintechs and banks have to collaborate to make this successful.
Completely agree. And it's funny, I mean, the pie is big enough for everyone to play in it.
And it's getting bigger as well.
Sandpit or whatever you want to say. But, from my perspective, I mean, it's interesting, Critty. I think as we sort of built our relationship together, I mean, very much the early conversations is about how do we partner, what is it that we can help also deliver for you guys, right? In terms of what you guys are focusing on. So some of the example that you just gave around how do we actually work with, your merchant base, right? To bring some value to, your clients. So we very much see bank partners as true partners for what we do at Finmo as well.
Yeah.
Do you think there was a mindset change inside of big institutions at some point where everyone was like, you know what, instead of trying to fight them off, maybe if we just invite them in, it can be better?
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. We always thought about controlled treasury, centralized treasury,
Right.
and I think that's changed.
Yeah.
It's now about how do we do treasury with ecosystem connect.
Yeah.
So it can't be one bank leading it or 3 banks leading it. It's just impossible to have the geographical reach and that client demand of instant, real-time, 24/7 I need to know where my payment is in 2 seconds,
Right.
just alone.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, same philosophy at Finmo, right? I mean, from our point of view, spending the last few decades in various payment companies, we knew that we actually wanted to bring these bank components together, right? And so that's what we sort of focus on. It's not one bank, it's several banks. And, we look to like partner with all of them, basically, from our perspective. One real small story.
Go for it.
So a very, very large enterprise client who will remain unnamed.
Nameless.
Again, very surprised in terms of this speed agility thing, right? So, we went over to the US, to meet with them, etc. And so one of the things is like, how can we do this money movement thing better or whatever the case is? And we're like, well, we can deliver these services to you, but actually, don't you have this internally already? Yes, we do, but it's sitting over here in perhaps another business or whatever the case is. So the other point that I'll make is
interesting.
It's always about, thinking through kind of different ways of innovating, different ways of bringing, new technology to the table, what have you. But, large organizations also struggle with this, right?
Yeah,
it's not just the small, it's not just the large. I think everyone's trying to figure out, how do I prioritize different effort? How do I focus on the right things? And we see that across the base as well.
And and I think that's where we're here to make a difference, because we've seen some really, really large payment companies in this space who started maybe 10 years back.
Right.
If you look at their treasury, right,
Yeah.
they're sitting on 1,500 accounts,
Yeah.
logging into 100
Right.
online banking systems
Right.
Yeah.
to pull
All
up
separate and fragmented.
all separate.
Yeah.
So I was just talking to someone and he said, I have 10 treasury people in my team.
Yeah.
They're all on different banking logging systems,
Right.
trying to pull up the report.
Refreshing.
Refreshing. Has the money coming? And we and the reason we work a lot, we've created this team and we work with a lot of fintechs, is to say, you know what, you don't need 1,500 accounts. I can give you 4 accounts. I
Yep.
can give you one banking system.
Right.
We can integrate with your ERP and you can get all of it together. It's very good to start early.
So you've made a lot of really good points about multiple bank accounts, all these sort of fragmented systems and stuff like that. We've talked a little bit about how it comes together, but talk to me in more detail about cash visibility, why it's so important, and where it works together for both of you.
No, absolutely. Look, it's the central thing of what we do, right, for our merchants. Really, it starts with aggregating sort of cash visibility for our merchants. So whether that be, different bank accounts around the region and globe, it's all about, how do I get that insight into my cash balance, right? From there, what I can do is actually use also that data for downstream sort of planning purposes, right? Whether it be cash flow forecasting, better capital management optimization, yield, invest products. So we talked a little bit about the MMF, etc. I think for us, it's about how do we connect into sort of the banking infrastructure. We love working with banks that are API driven, that are open, etc. And look, I admit that, around the region, that there's a varying level of maturity around that, right? Some banks are perhaps still, host to host, file upload capability, etc. But what we're seeing is more digitization from banks. And what we do is we tend to work with the top 2-3 banks in each of the markets.
Right.
So we cover off on, 70 to 80% of the market. But really what that's about, again, is about connecting the banks in, getting the visibility and doing the downstream treasury workflow management.
And we just enable that. So if you look at today the financial landscape or even the corporate landscape, there are various people who are operating, like you mentioned, host to host. A lot of larger corporates want host to host. Some of them, which are still fragmented, will still log into an online portal. And then now the API connectivities come. I think what we are enabling is, we of course have the systems which can give you complete visibility, can get you cash pooling done in the locations that you want. How do you move restricted currencies? How do you actually do real-time movement of money? How do you do just-in-time funding? All of that is very data driven. So what are the key things? You need to have the right APIs in place. You need to have the right reportings through the APIs that you need. You need data standardization.
Absolutely.
And you need to be able to enter 20, 35 countries with the similar specs.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't come to David and say, hey, you want to get into 14 countries? Let me send you 20 different API specs to integrate with. It'll probably take 2 years, right?
We could probably do a bit faster than that.
But still, if standardization occurs on your side,
Yes.
then serving it, that standardization
Exactly.
becomes easier on Finmo's side.
API
That's right.
enablement, what do you need? The reporting, etc. How can we get more advanced?
Yeah.
I mean, now we're getting into the whole blockchain smart contract space.
Absolutely.
How much information can be provided there? How can you run your entire compliance processes on one smart contract instead of having it in 10 different countries every time
Yeah.
the money hits the account, you
Right.
know?
I mean, now we're getting into some geeky space, as I
Yeah.
call it. We can probably go on for the
I
next
was
2
gonna-
hours.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know that we have the time,
but show on,
but just a
smart
small point
contracts,
on
but
that. I mean,
please comment on it.
you know, really, I think we see that space as like I call it rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Right, it's the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
stuff, different underlying technology,
Yeah.
right? The blockchain, etc. And yes, it's public, so there's a question mark of like corporates whether they want to put their treasury on the public blockchain or whatever the case is. But if you look at it from a technology perspective, wallet infrastructure similar to an account, right? It's really, from our point of view, just a currency conversion from, you know, a new world back into the old
Yeah.
world, or vice versa, right? So I think we see it the same
Yeah.
way.
And you know, the fact that you can make it very modular.
Yeah.
We're far away from one model fits all.
For sure.
I think it's very important to make everything modular so the client can pick and choose what they can do. I think Finmo does that beautifully, and
We try our
we are
best.
learning from
We try-
Finmo.
we try our best.
So we've also started putting, you know, it's not about getting the product. Like
Yeah.
Treasury was always
Yeah.
like, what product do you want?
Yeah.
Let me give the product to them. I think it's just about what solution do you
Yeah.
want.
How can
No,
we help
and
you
that's-
solve this problem?
That's
Absolutely.
our ethos, you know. Let's
Absolutely.
get the solution.
But
out.
but in all seriousness, I mean, we are very modular.
Yeah.
I think from our perspective, you can take cash visibility, you can take forecasting, you can take FX, you can take integration into our accounting software. You can take all of it or none of it or some of it.
Yeah.
I think for us, we're solving different problems for different merchants,
Yeah.
right? To exactly your point. So it's not a one size fits all. And I think the other thing is clients want a bit of flexibility in terms of how they actually
Yeah.
integrate, whether it be APIs, whether it be through the portal in a no code solution or whatever the case is. You know, we can deliver that too. Interestingly, just last point is there's a lot coming up around data localization. Right,
Yeah.
and whether or not we can provide an instance of the Treasury platform into a particular country or whatever the case is.
Right,
And
because
so
they want to have
something-
their data sovereignty.
Yeah.
That's something else that we're solving for our merchants
Yeah.
as well.
Right. Okay, you guys have been amazing. Thank you again, Kruti Jain, David Hanna.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
We are welcoming Jesse To, the global treasurer at Coda Payments, into the conversation. How are you doing today? Welcome to ATP and welcome to the Singapore FinTech Festival 2025. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me here. It's a great day to be here.
It's awesome to have you here.
Yeah.
Good to have you, Jesse.
Okay, let's just jump right into this again. Coda operates across dozens of markets with fast-moving payment flows. How do you approach managing liquidity and visibility in such a dynamic cross-border environment?
Yeah. So I think before if you may, let me elaborate a little bit about Coda and
Please.
what kind of drives that flywheel. So for Coda, we are the global digital monetization and distribution platform. So we actually help digital providers, for example, like gaming and live streaming, to be able to monetize in and out of the app. So that requires lots of payments globally. We actually have our marketplace. We actually distribute to other, resellers in our market. So lots of money movements that's actually taking place across. So we operate in 73 countries. We have 400 payment methods. So lots of
400
activity.
payment methods.
Yes,
That's
there's
a lot
lots
of
of
payment
activity
methods.
going on, and therefore, with all the currency, and majority of all our clients we do are all cross-border transactions,
Right.
and they're all very small ticket transactions, which makes monitoring and understanding that liquidity really, really important, and then that visibility to that, right? Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
Hey, and Jesse, I mean, I've been following obviously your story for a while, and we're friends, etc. I mean,
Yeah.
and take us through some of the challenges of the cross-border element of your business.
I think the one of the challenges actually, obviously operating in so many markets is one. So actually understand the local, dynamic, the regulations, what happens on the ground, collections. So for Treasury, where we see really our value add is we try to meet with our payment partners where they find the best, right? To settle us where it makes the most sense. So that involves, coordinating with, all the partners and working with a lot of our banking partners to be able to say that what's the best way for us to receive. And then Treasury will then manage that risk and move that money across the border. Now, it's really important that we have that visibility, and it's 24/7, you never really
yeah,
sleep.
absolutely.
So yes, that's one of the challenges that we really have.
I
Yeah.
planted a little seed there because my former life, I think, as you know, I spent 20 20 years in the regulatory space. So
there you go.
managing these complexities, I feel your pain.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, one of the things that David and I were talking about actually before you joined was this sort of data fragmentation.
Yeah.
If you're operating in that many countries, and if all of it's cross-border, you're literally talking about probably millions and millions of foreign exchange transactions as well.
Yeah.
How do you, like, it's so dynamic. How do you make sure that everything's consolidated in the right place? Particularly, you said 24/7. So now it's not just batch processing tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's in real time.
Yes, yes. I think having a good data set is important for us.
For sure.
So our product team has come up with dashboards and all, so that we can actually monitor each transaction, and all the specific details of the transaction. Why did it? Why was it successful? Why did it fail? What's the conversion rate? All these details is really important for us to actually have that visibility and know that at each point in time, where is the money movements, right? And I think traditional, money movements has taken a long time.
Yeah.
All right. Yes.
We called it at the speed of paperwork at the beginning of this. So yeah, definitely.
It is true. And I think, considering that we also deal with a lot of emerging markets, in some cases where it is dollar liquidity is very scarce as well. Yeah. So we have to be creative and think of ways, how do you actually monitor that fund flow, at the same time even find counterparties to help you move that liquidity out of those markets.
You touched on something there, Jesse, that I wanted to ask you, actually, liquidity management.
Yeah.
Right? Tell us about how you manage that. You mentioned 73 markets or whatever the number was, which is huge, right? Many different currencies across the world. I mean, from a Finmo perspective, that's kind of what we do day in, day out, even for our own business.
Yeah.
Tell us some of the challenges that you see in, the netting off component, the liquidity management, currency risk, currency restriction. You can see. I've also gone through the pain as well. But tell us from your perspective.
You're speaking my lingo. Yeah, I think the centralization of information is important. We have so many bank accounts everywhere, and it's not that I want to keep so many accounts open, because sometimes it can be inefficient. But the thing is that certain banks or certain rails can only work for certain purposes. So the best thing to do is really to centralize all that information onto a dashboard in this like a treasury management system, where at any point in time I know, okay, where are the funds coming, and it based on that ability to see where the funds are coming, it also helps us predict better, like what's going to be happening next. It's not a backward-looking thing. It's more when we have more real-time information, it actually really helps us to make better decisions. Do I keep because without this information, what happens is that we tend to keep extra cash there when it's not necessary.
Right.
And it might not yield enough, and then therefore that's why having this information is really important.
I'm laughing because you literally have recounted our conversation earlier. You said the exact same thing.
Oh, really? Oh.
It's really interesting to hear a practitioner talk about the practices on a daily basis. I mean, like I think from my perspective, that sort of connecting your bank account was key. As you said that, right? And we all want to be competitive in a global space.
Yes.
You're moving at a rate of knots. Your competitors are as well.
Yes.
And yes, you have to keep looking for other ways of collecting money, efficiency, all that sort of good stuff. But one of the things you said is about, connecting those bank accounts into a central platform, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that, you thought could be possible? I want to sort of understand from your perspective, because a lot of people that I talk to in the finance area, they're still managing it on Excel. Yeah. They're still managing it separately in isolated systems, etc. I mean, tell us about, how you did it and, how you believe that this was possible instead of just managing it in an isolated world.
Yeah, we'll definitely centralize it on a system. You definitely need to, if you're managing that many accounts.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just managing a single business in a single country, then Excel spreadsheet is fine. But if you're having global businesses,
I call that building a widget in a single market, which we talked about.
Exactly. But I think about this all the time. Like, I have a bank account in Japan.
Yeah.
I have no idea how much money's in it.
Yeah.
I have a bank account in Thailand. I have no idea how much money's in it. And I have a bank account in New York. I have no idea combined what it is.
Can I introduce you to Finmo?
Yeah, but you have 73 countries and probably thousands of bank accounts. Same thing.
No. So actually, the funny thing I always say when I give it the example is I give it from a personal perspective.
That's why I did that. Yeah,
exactly like that. And I always say, I don't know how poor I am on any one day.
Exactly.
I have mortgages, rent, cars, different bank accounts, etc. You extrapolate that in a business context. The complexity goes through the roof.
Exactly.
I mean, I talked about 1,000 accounts, right? I mean, you talked about 400 or whatever the number is. But, when you dissect the accounts by account type, operations, investment, corporate, client, etc., the number goes through the roof, right?
It does.
Yeah, yes.
It does.
So what we do is that we actually, the problem is that when you don't have visibility, then you tend to buffer more.
Right. So
And
that,
then when you buffer, like, okay, let's say I have like 100 accounts, I buffer a little bit here and here and here. And then when you accumulate everything and you realize that's so much inefficiency.
I was going to say.
And then you start calculating, like, if I had placed this in a money market fund or whatever,
100%.
I would have earned so much.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking about, capital inefficiency. It's so inefficient.
True. Yeah, it's very true. So we comb through that, and that's why we need to have a centralized, system. And a centralized system also enables us to optimize where we are paying as well, where we are routing the fund flow.
Absolutely.
Right? Because, you have different arrangement with different counterparties.
Sure.
We even go to the extent to say that, okay, which bank is this counterparty using? Oh, then we route it to the bank that we have so that we actually save on the fees.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, one further insight, just again from our earlier conversation, be interested in your thoughts. I mean, the kind of intelligence or the insight that you saw when you connected sort of the bank accounts in, like, can you take us through like one or two examples of, what you can now see versus what you couldn't see before, right? Because we talked a lot about being reactive in the Excel spreadsheet way versus actually connecting it in and actually seeing kind of insight. And, things could be better FX, currency risk, as we talked about, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
What do you see from your perspective, Jesse?
Yeah, so I think immediately is being able to see whether did we actually kind of over buffered, are we being inefficient, right?
Yeah.
So we actually can study like how much the balances has been so far, and we've never reached that low. So that access is, hey, there's evidence to show that, on a daily basis, or even like it never reaches this level, or even during the day, like, okay, these funds typically come in at this time instead. So we can actually, take out the funds, right after it comes in. So it's very much of a just-in-time thing.
Yeah.
And why is that important? I think two factors, right? Like for us, being able to settle to our publishers and merchants on a timely basis is really important. So liquidity is really important. And they're pushing us. They say that I want faster.
Right.
And then we go over to our partners and say, I also want faster and faster. But if you have no visibility, you're like, even the guy paid you, you're like, did you pay me?
Right. And how would I know?
Exactly. So I mean, for Treasury, because we both have pay-ins and payouts, being able to tell straight away whether the funds arrive will be able to actually help us buffer, and figure out how to net the exposures, and how to just improve that the
Do
money
you
movement.
think being so connected
and
having so much more visibility, first of all, I think we talked about this earlier, you can ask different questions, you can ask better questions, but also you can make better decisions. It changes the way you think about things. But do you think over time, and we can end on this, but you think over time, it changes the role of what a treasurer actually is, because you can be so much more proactive and so much more informative to the people that are working
that's
around.
such a great question. I was going to ask it even more simply. Do you feel like the hero of the story, Jesse, now? Right? Have we brought sexiness back to the finance function?
Much better said.
Oh, wow. No, I'm actually a massive believer of that. So, I mean, for just a bit of background, I was in banking for several years before stepping into Treasury. And I've always believed, and even when I was in banking, I always preached the fact that treasurers have such a strategic role in the organization,
Completely.
right? It's no longer just about how much money can I safeguard. It's like, once you know how much, how the money moves, you can make things more efficient for people. You give them more liquidity. You have better returns. To me, every treasury should be a profit center in any organization.
100%. There you go.
Yes.
Hero of the story. See?
Thank you again for joining us, Jesse.
Thank you
That
so
was
much.
awesome. Thank
Yes.
you.